My name is Caroline Evans. I'm 28 now, but the night that shaped me happened when I was 12. My father, Dave, locked me in the basement freezer during a Minnesota blizzard. He looked me straight through the reinforced glass door and said, "Cold builds character. Freezing will teach you discipline." The metal walls pressed against my shoulders like a coffin. My breath fogged in desperate clouds, but what cut deepest wasn't the cold seeping through my pajamas. It was the methodical way he checked his watch before closing the door. Like timing was part of the lesson. The neighbors' windows glowed warm through the basement's single window. I saw shadows moving behind curtains, families settling in for dinner. They were so close, yet they might as well have been on another planet. That night, I thought I might actually die. But in a way, I did. Because after that, nothing in my life looked the same. Not school, not home, not me. Trauma doesn't always leave scars you can see. Sometimes it calcifies around your ribs, changing the way you breathe forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 28 years later, I would finally learn why my survival wasn't an accident. But first, I had to survive the aftermath of that night, because the storm outside wasn't half as brutal as the storm waiting inside. Dr. Sarah Chen's office smells like lavender and lies. The same artificial calm they pump into dental offices to mask the drilling. I've been coming here for 6 months, circling around the truth like a moth around flame, never quite ready to burn. Today feels different. Today my hands won't stop shaking. Caroline, you seem particularly tense today. Dr. Chen's pen hovers over her notepad, ready to dissect whatever I'm about to confess. Would you like to talk about what's troubling you? My gloves feel like armor. Cotton and wool barriers between the world and the truth carved into my flesh. I've worn them to every session, even in summer. Professional necessity, I told her. I work with my hands. But we both know that's not the whole story. The dreams are getting worse, I say, which is true, but not the truth she needs to hear. The same basement, the same cold. She nods with practiced sympathy. Recurring nightmares often represent unresolved trauma. Have you considered that these dreams might be your mind's way of processing difficult memories? Difficult memories? As if what happened to me was a challenging math problem instead of systematic torture disguised as discipline. What if they're not dreams? The question slips out before I can catch it. Dr. Chen's pen stops moving. I can feel her attention sharpen like a blade. What do you mean? My hands move to the gloves without conscious thought. The fabric is soft, comfortable, familiar. It's hidden the evidence for so long that removing it feels like stripping naked in public. But the scars underneath have been burning lately, phantom pain from damage that never fully healed. What if they're memories? The silence stretches between us like a frozen lake. One wrong step, and everything cracks open. Caroline, Dr. Chen's voice is gentle, but probing. You've mentioned before that your family has concerns about your recollections of childhood events. Your father seems very worried about your tendency to what? To remember being abused? The words come out sharper than intended, but I'm tired of dancing around the truth. He's worried about me remembering because he's the one who did it. Dr. Chen sets down her pen. This is the moment I've been building toward for months, the confession that will either validate my reality or confirm my family's narrative that I'm unstable, attention-seeking, dramatic. Slowly, deliberately, I peel off my left glove. The fluorescent light catches the white, raised scars across my knuckles, the permanent discoloration where frostbite took hold and never let go. My fingertips are blunt and numb, nerve damage that makes simple tasks like typing a constant reminder of that night. Dr. Chen's intake of breath is sharp, involuntary. Professional composure can't hide human shock. The right hand is worse, I say, removing the other glove. The scarring runs from my fingertips to my wrist, a topographic map of pain written in scar tissue. And my feet, but those I keep covered more easily. She leans forward, her professional mask slipping. Caroline, How long have you had these injuries? Since I was 12, since the night he locked me in the freezer for talking back at dinner. 4 hours. I know because I counted every minute on the digital display. When he finally let me out, I couldn't feel my hands or feet. He drove me to the emergency room and told them I'd fallen through ice while playing outside. Dr. Chen is staring at the scars like they're artifacts from another civilization, which in a way they are. Evidence from the civilization of my childhood, where pain was called love and torture was called discipline. Did you tell the hospital staff what really happened? I almost laugh, but it comes out hollow. I was 12, hypothermic and terrified. And Dave is the high school principal, respected community member, devoted, single father doing his best after his mother's mental breakdown. The bitter irony coats my tongue. Who were they going to believe? Your mother?
Rebecca wasn't there. She couldn't be. Dave had already convinced everyone she was unstable, unfit. By the time that night happened, she was already being painted as the crazy ex-wife who abandoned her family. I flexed my damaged fingers, watching the scars stretch white against reddened skin. Convenient timing. Dr. Chen is writing now, fast, urgent notes that look nothing like her usual measured observations. Caroline, these are serious allegations. If what you're telling me is true, the word hits like a slap. You think I gave myself frostbite? You think I scarred my own hands for attention? No, of course not. I just mean that memories can be complicated, especially traumatic ones. Sometimes my mind didn't create these scars. I hold up my hands, forcing her to look at the evidence. My mind didn't damage the nerves in my feet. Physical evidence doesn't lie, Dr. Chen. People do. She's quiet for a long moment, studying my hands like she's seeing them for the first time, which, in a way, she is. For 6 months, I'd hidden the proof of my truth under cotton gloves and careful lies. What you're describing would constitute serious child abuse, she says carefully. If you're certain these memories are accurate, they're not memories. I pull my gloves back on, armor restored. They're facts. Facts that everyone in my life has convinced me to doubt, to hide, to be ashamed of. But facts don't disappear just because they're inconvenient. Dr. Chen sets down her pen and looks at me directly. For the first time since I've been seeing her, I feel truly seen. What do you want to do with this information, Caroline? It's the question I've been avoiding for 16 years. The question that terrifies me because I already know the answer. I want the truth to matter. I want someone to believe me. And I want Dave to face what he did. The admission hangs in the air like smoke. There's no taking it back now. No pretending this is just therapy, just healing, just moving forward. This is about justice, about validation, about proving that the scared 12-year-old girl who counted minutes in a freezer deserved protection, not punishment. That would mean going back to Minnesota, confronting your family, possibly involving law enforcement. The thought makes my stomach clench, but the alternative, living the rest of my life as someone's victim, someone's lie, is worse. I know. I stand up, my scarred hands steady for the first time in months. I'm ready. The flight to Minneapolis feels like traveling backward through time. Every mile closer to Minnesota strips away another layer of the life I've built in Seattle. By the time I collect my rental car, I'm not Caroline Evans, software consultant with a downtown apartment and a carefully curated LinkedIn profile. I'm just Caroline, the troubled daughter who never learned to be grateful for her father's discipline. The Miller house sits on Elm Street like a monument to suburban perfection. White siding, black shutters, a front porch that probably hosts barbecues and birthday parties for the new family living there. It looks smaller than I remembered, but trauma has a way of making everything feel enormous when you're 12. I park across the street and watch for a moment. A woman in yoga pants wrestles a toddler into a car seat, while an older child bounces a basket doll against the garage door. Normal family chaos. The kind of noise that never existed in this house when it was ours. The woman notices me staring and waves uncertainly. Stranger in a rental car, probably lost, maybe needing directions. I wave back and cross the street, my story already forming. Hi there, I'm Caroline Evans, well, Caroline Miller back then. I used to live here, years ago. I was in town and wondered if I could just take a quick look around for nostalgia's sake. Her face lights up with recognition and curiosity. Oh my gosh, you're Dave's daughter. He talks about you sometimes. I'm Jennifer Walsh. We bought the house from your dad about 3 years ago. She extends a hand, genuinely warm. He's such a sweetheart, your father. Still sends Christmas cards, always asks how we're settling in. The familiar knot forms in my stomach. Of course he does. Dave never met a reputation he couldn't maintain or a narrative he couldn't control. That sounds like him, I manage. He's always been attentive to details. Jennifer doesn't catch the edge in my voice. Come on in. The kids would love to meet someone who grew up here. Tommy's always asking about the house's history. The interior is transformed. Gone are the beige walls and sparse furniture of my childhood, replaced by family photos, children's artwork, and the comfortable clutter of people who actually live here instead of just existing. The living room where I used to sit silent through Dave's lectures about gratitude and respect now echoes with cartoon voices from a tablet. We've made some changes, obviously, she says, steering me toward the kitchen. But the bones of the house are still the same. Your dad took really good care of everything. Can I see the basement? The question comes out too quick, too urgent. Jennifer's eyebrows rise slightly. Sure, though there's not much down there. We mostly use it for storage now. She opens the familiar door, flicks on the light. Watch the steps, they're steeper than they look. The basement air hits me like a physical blow. Musty, cold, carrying the ghost sense of detergent and despair. The cement walls are the same institutional gray, but Jennifer has added shelving units and plastic storage bins, holiday decorations, outgrown clothes, the detritus of a growing family.
And in the corner, exactly where I left it 16 years ago, stands the freezer. It's smaller than my nightmares made it, a chest-style unit with a heavy lid and digital temperature display, the kind of appliance that looks innocuous until you know what it's capable of holding. My hands start to shake despite my gloves. That old thing came with the house, Jennifer says, following my stare. We keep meaning to replace it, but it still works fine. Your dad said it was a good investment. You never know when you might need extra storage space. I step closer, my footsteps echoing off concrete. The digital display reads -18 degrees Fahrenheit, Arctic preservation temperature. Perfect for keeping meat fresh, or for teaching 12-year-old girls about discipline. Did he ever mention why he kept it down here instead of in the garage? My voice sounds distant, detached, like someone else is asking. I think he said something about the concrete floor being more stable. We never really questioned it. Jennifer's tone shifts slightly. She's picking up on my tension, the way I'm staring at the freezer like it might attack. Are you okay? You look a little pale. The lid opens with a soft pneumatic hiss. Inside, the metal walls gleam under the fluorescent lights, spotless and waiting. I can almost see the imprint of my 12-year-old body curled in the corner, can almost hear Dave's voice explaining that this was for my own good. I'm fine, the lie comes automatically. Just brings back memories, you know? Jennifer nods sympathetically, but I can see the questions forming behind her eyes. Why would a freezer bring back memories? What kind of childhood experiences happen in basements? Your dad always spoke so fondly of raising you here. He mentioned it was just the two of you after your mom, well, after she had her troubles. There it is, the official narrative still alive and well in this suburban kitchen. Rebecca Miller, the unstable wife who couldn't handle family life. Dave Miller, the devoted father who stepped up when she stepped out. It's a story this community has been telling itself for years, and they've got it down to a comfortable rhythm. What exactly did he tell you about my mother? Jennifer shifts uncomfortably. Just that she had some mental health issues, couldn't cope with family responsibilities. He said it was really hard on you, losing your mom so young. She pauses, studying my expression. I hope I'm not overstepping. It's just that he seemed so sad when he talked about it, how hard it was to explain to a young girl why her mother couldn't be there anymore. The manipulation is breathtaking in its completeness. Not only has Dave erased Rebecca from the story, he's made himself the tragic hero, this single father struggling to fill an impossible void.
And I'm cast as the victim of my mother's abandonment, not my father's abuse. He painted quite a picture, I say, my voice carefully neutral. Very comprehensive. He did mention that you'd had some difficulties as a teenager, acting out, I think he said, but he always emphasized how much he loved you, how hard he worked to help you through it. Jennifer's tone is gentle, concerned. I hope things are better for you now. Acting out. Of course. Any attempt to tell the truth about what happened in this house would have been labeled as acting out. Any cry for help would have been reframed as teenage rebellion. Dave didn't just abuse me, he inoculated the entire community against believing me. They're getting better, I say. And for the first time in years, it doesn't feel like a lie. We head back upstairs, but I can feel the freezer's presence below us in the foundation of this cheerful family home. Jennifer offers coffee, asks about my life in Seattle, makes the kind of small talk that normal people share when they're not drowning in buried trauma. As I'm leaving, she pauses at the front door. You know, your friend Alex still lives in town. Alex Rivera. They mentioned knowing you when we first moved in. I could give you their number if you'd like to reconnect. Alex. My best friend until I wasn't anyone's friend anymore. Until Dave's narrative about my instability made maintaining relationships too risky for the other families in town. That would be great, I say, though my stomach clenches at the thought of facing another person who lived through Dave's version of my childhood. Thank you. I drive away from the house with Alex's number in my phone and ice in my veins. The perfect suburban facade slides past my windows. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns. The kind of neighborhood where bad things don't happen to good families, unless you count the bad things that happen behind closed doors, in basements, in stories that never get told. My phone buzzes with a text from an unknown local number. Heard you were in town. Coffee tomorrow? It's Alex. The message fills me with equal parts hope and dread. Alex was there during those years. Alex saw the injuries, heard the explanations, lived through Dave's careful construction of reality. The question is, what version of the story has Alex been carrying all these years? Alex looks older than our 28 years, the kind of aging that comes from carrying other people's pain for a living. We meet at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of aggressively cozy place with chalkboard menus and baristas who remember your order. Alex orders black coffee and sits with her back to the wall. Occupational hazard of being a social worker, or maybe just the caution of someone who learned early that safety is never guaranteed.
You look good, Alex says, though their eyes linger on my gloves with recognition. Seattle treating you well? Can't complain. I stir sugar into my latte, buying time. We've exchanged maybe 5 words since high school graduation, and those were mostly polite nothings at a mutual friend's wedding. Thanks for meeting me. I wasn't sure if you'd want to. Alex's laugh is hollow. Honestly, I wasn't sure either. But when Jennifer Walsh mentioned you'd been by the house, they trail off, studying my face. Why are you back, Caroline? After all this time? The question hangs between us like a challenge. Alex knows something. I can see it in the careful way they're holding their coffee cup, in the tension around their eyes. The question is how much and whether they're willing to admit it. I'm trying to piece some things together. About my childhood. About what really happened in that house. Alex's hands tighten around their mug. What do you mean, what really happened? You know what I mean. I lean forward, dropping my voice. You were there, Alex. You saw the injuries. You heard the explanations. You knew something was wrong. For a moment, Alex looks like they might deny it, stick to the safe narrative, the one that doesn't require them to confront their own complicity. Then their shoulders sag, and I see the guilt they've been carrying for 16 years. I was a kid, Caroline. We both were. And everyone said that you had problems, that you made things up. What things did I make up? I pull off my gloves and set my hands on the table between us. The scars are stark against the dark wood, impossible to ignore. Jesus, Caroline, I remember those. You said you'd fallen through ice, but it was summer. Dave said I'd fallen through ice. I said he locked me in the freezer. Which version did you believe? The silence stretches until other conversations fill the space around us. A mother arguing with her teenager about curfew, an elderly couple debating movie times, normal people with normal problems unburdened by the weight of buried truth. I wanted to believe you, Alex finally whispers. But my parents, the school, everyone kept saying you were troubled, that your mom leaving had messed you up, made you attention-seeking. And Dave was so... They gesture helplessly. He was respected. Principal Miller, pillar of the community. Why would anyone believe that he would hurt his own daughter? Because daughters get hurt by fathers every day. The words come out harder than I intend, but I'm tired of tiptoeing around other people's comfort. Alex wipes her eyes with a napkin. I became a social worker because of you. Did you know that? Because I failed you when we were kids, and I swore I'd never let that happen to another child on my watch. It's an admission and an apology and a confession all wrapped into one, and it breaks something open in my chest that I didn't even know was still locked. Tell me about my mother. What do you remember about Rebecca? Alex's expression shifts, confusion replacing guilt. Your mom? Caroline, she left when you were little. She had a breakdown or something, couldn't handle being a parent. That's what everyone said. What if everyone was wrong? What do you mean? Continuing the storytelling process requires us to know your feelings about the story, so help us support these free stories by subscribing to our channel and leaving a comment below the video. Now, back to what we were reading. I pull out my phone and show Alex the results of my morning research. Public records, employment databases, the digital breadcrumbs that prove Rebecca Miller didn't disappear into madness. She was systematically erased. She lives in Duluth now, has for the past 8 years, works night shifts cleaning office buildings. I scroll through the information I've compiled. Before that, she was in a series of women's shelters, transitional housing, the kind of places you end up when you're running from something, or someone. Alex studies the screen with professional interest. This doesn't make sense. If she was alive, if she was stable, why wouldn't she have stayed in contact? Why wouldn't she have fought for custody? Maybe she did try to fight. Maybe Dave made sure she couldn't win. The possibility hangs between us like a bridge neither of us is sure we want to cross. If Rebecca didn't abandon me, if she was silenced instead of unstable, then the entire foundation of our shared childhood narrative crumbles. I need to talk to her. I need to know what really happened. Alex nods slowly. Do you want me to come with you? As a social worker, I mean? Sometimes these reunification conversations go better with a neutral third party present. The offer surprises me with its generosity. Alex, who spent years believing I was a liar, now willing to help me uncover the truth. Actually, yes, that would help. We drive to Duluth in Alex's reliable Honda, the kind of car that screams responsible adult with a steady job and a carefully managed life. The conversation flows easier on the road, as if the movement helps dislodge memories that have been stuck for years. I remember your mom being sad a lot, but not crazy sad, just kind of defeated, maybe, like she'd given up on something. Do you remember her leaving? Not really. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. Dave explained that she needed help, that it was better for everyone if she got treatment somewhere else. We were kids, we didn't question adult decisions. But I'm questioning them now. Every mile toward Duluth feels like another step away from the comfortable lies and toward whatever truth has been waiting for me in a world I was told I'd lost forever. Rebecca's apartment complex is the kind of place people live when they're rebuilding from nothing. Clean but basic, functional rather than comfortable. Alex and I sit in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I work up the courage to get out of the car. Building C, apartment 247. I read from the address I found online. What if she doesn't want to see me? What if Dave was right and she really can't handle having me in her life? Alex reaches over and squeezes my shoulder. Then we'll deal with that. But Caroline, what if he was wrong? What if she's been waiting 16 years for someone to believe her enough to look for her? The thought is almost too hopeful to bear, but I've come too far to turn back now. The woman who answers the door is unmistakably my mother, though she's aged in ways that go beyond the simple passage of time. Rebecca Miller, at 48, looks like someone who has survived something terrible and is still surprised to be alive. Her hair is shorter, streaked with premature gray,
and she's thinner than I remember. But her eyes are exactly as I remember them. Sad, yes, but not broken. Watchful, but not crazy. Caroline? Oh my God, Caroline! And then I'm in her arms, breathing in the scent of laundry detergent and hope, feeling 16 years of questions dissolve into the simple truth that my mother never stopped being my mother, no matter what lies were told to keep us apart. We sit in her small living room, Alex tactfully positioned near the door in case this reunion goes badly, but it doesn't feel like it will. Rebecca keeps touching my face like she's afraid I'll disappear, and I keep staring at her like I'm trying to memorize every detail I was told I'd never see again. I tried to find you, she says, tears streaming down her cheeks. I tried so many times, but Dave had lawyers, restraining orders, court documents that said I was unstable. Every time I tried to make contact, he'd call the police and say I was violating the custody agreement. What custody agreement? I ask, though I think I already know the answer. Rebecca gets up and goes to a small desk in the corner, returning with a manila folder worn soft at the edges. Inside are court documents, police reports, medical records, a paper trail of a woman fighting for her daughter against a system designed to silence her. He had me declared mentally unfit, she says, spreading the documents on her coffee table. Claimed I was delusional, that I was making up stories about abuse to get custody. He had character witnesses, colleagues, neighbors, even your pediatrician, who testified that I was unstable, that my allegations were fantasies. I pick up a police report dated 3 months before Rebecca supposedly left. It describes a domestic disturbance call where Rebecca Miller was found in a state of extreme agitation, making incoherent claims about child endangerment. The responding officer noted that the alleged victim showed no signs of abuse, and that the father, David Miller, was calm and cooperative, clearly concerned about his wife's mental state. I called the police that night, the night he put you in the freezer. I heard you crying, heard the freezer door slam. By the time I got to the basement, you were unconscious. He said you'd passed out from throwing a tantrum, that you'd locked yourself in there to get attention. My hands are shaking as I turn through more documents. Report after report of Rebecca trying to get help, to get someone to investigate, to get someone to believe her, and report after report of officials concluding that she was an unstable woman trying to manipulate the system. The pediatrician, I say, finding Dr. Thompson's statement, he said you were fixated on minor childhood injuries and that you showed signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Rebecca nods balely. Dave coached me on what to say at your appointments, told me exactly how to explain your injuries, falls, accidents, normal childhood clumsiness. When I tried to tell Dr. Thompson the truth, Dave was right there contradicting me, explaining my delusions with such concern and authority. Alex leans forward, their professional training engaged. What happened to make you stop trying? Rebecca's face crumples. The final custody hearing. Dave's lawyer presented evidence that I was a danger to Caroline, recorded phone calls where I threatened Dave, witnessed statements about my erratic behavior, medical opinions about my mental state. The judge terminated my parental rights and issued a restraining order. If I came within 500 feet of Caroline or ever tried to contact her in any way, I'd go to jail. The room falls silent except for the sound of Rebecca crying and the distant hum of traffic outside. I'm holding court documents that rewrite my entire childhood, evidence that the abandonment I've carried like a wound for 16 years was actually an amputation. My mother didn't leave me. She was surgically removed. So you just gave up? The question comes out harsher than I intend, but I need to understand how she could have stayed away for so long.
I never gave up. Rebecca's voice is fierce despite her tears. I've been documenting everything for 16 years. Every birthday I missed, every school event I couldn't attend. Every night I wondered if you were safe. I hired private investigators to check on you from a distance. I saved every newspaper clipping about your father's career, looking for cracks in his reputation. I never stopped fighting, Caroline. I just had to fight from the shadows. She goes back to the desk and returns with a larger box, this one filled with photographs, newspaper clippings, school records she somehow managed to obtain, a secret archive of the childhood I thought she'd missed entirely.
Your graduation from high school, she says, showing me a photo of myself in cap and gown that must have been taken from very far away. Your college acceptance letter. I have a copy from when your school's newsletter mentioned it. The article about your software company winning that innovation award 2 years ago. I stare at the evidence of 16 years of love from a distance, of a mother who never stopped being a mother, even when the law said she had no right to the title. Why now? Alex asks gently. Why didn't you try to contact Caroline when she turned 18? Rebecca looks at me with a mixture of hope and fear. Because by then, you'd lived most of your life believing I was crazy, that I'd abandoned you. I was afraid that reaching out would only hurt you more. I was afraid you'd reject me the way the courts had. I think about all the years I spent angry at her, all the Father's Day cards I dutifully signed while secretly resenting the mother who wasn't there to balance Dave's particular brand of love, all the times I wondered what was wrong with me that my own mother couldn't stay. I never forgot you, I tell her. Even when everyone said you were sick, even when I tried to convince myself they were right, I never forgot the way you used to read to me before bed, or how you'd sneak me extra cookies when Dave wasn't looking. I remembered a mother who loved me, not one who was too crazy to care. Rebecca reaches for my hands and I let her take them, gloves and all. I need you to know that every day I was away from you was a choice between protecting you and loving you. Dave made sure those were my only options. I pull off my gloves and show her the scars that have defined my adult life. Rebecca gasps, her fingers hovering over the damaged skin like she's afraid to cause more pain. He did this to you, she whispers, and it's not a question. Among other things, I tell her about the freezer, about the systematic psychological abuse, about the years of gaslighting that made me question my own memories. Rebecca listens with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting 16 years to hear this story.
I have evidence, she says when I finish. Photos, medical records, documentation of every injury I tried to report. I've been building a case for years, hoping that someday I'd have the chance to use it. Alex has been quiet through most of this reunion, but now they speak up with professional authority. With this much documentation, especially if Caroline's willing to come forward as an adult victim, there might be enough for criminal charges. Historical abuse cases are difficult, but not impossible. The possibility hangs in the air like a promise and a threat. Justice, finally, after 16 years, but also the certainty of a public battle against the man who taught me that truth was whatever he said it was. I want to try, I say, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. I want people to know what he did, not just to me, but to you too. Rebecca nods, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Then let's do it, together this time. For the first time in 16 years, I'm not fighting alone. I have my mother back, and she has an arsenal of evidence that Dave Miller never knew existed. The scared 12-year-old who counted minutes in a freezer is about to have her day in court. But first, we need more than just our word against his. We need allies, witnesses, people with the authority to make others listen. We need to crack the perfect narrative that Dave has spent decades constructing. We need to make the truth impossible to ignore. Dr. Marcus Thompson's office exists in medical purgatory. Not quite retired, not quite active. The waiting room smells like old magazines and disinfectant, populated by a handful of elderly patients who probably followed him here from his main practice. When the receptionist calls my name, I feel Rebecca's hand squeeze mine. We've rehearsed this moment, but rehearsals never account for the way your stomach drops when confronting someone who could have saved you. Dr. Thompson looks older than his 45 years, the kind of premature aging that comes from carrying other people's pain. His handshake is firm but brief, and he doesn't quite meet my eyes as he leads us into his office. Miss Evans, Miss Miller, he settles behind his desk like it's a shield. I have to say, I was surprised to get your call. It's been quite some time. 16 years, I say, pulling off my gloves and placing my hands flat on his desk. The scars catch the fluorescent light, white and raised against my skin. Since the last time you treated these. Dr. Thompson stares at my hands for a long moment, and I watch recognition dawn in his eyes, not just of the scars, but of the moment he chose not to ask the right questions. I remember, he says quietly, multiple incidents of cold injury. Your father said you had a habit of playing outside inappropriately dressed for the weather.
My father said a lot of things. I keep my voice level, professional. What did the medical evidence say? Dr. Thompson opens a file cabinet and retrieves a thick folder. Caroline Miller, aged 12 to 16. 4 years of documented visits, each one a missed opportunity. Frostbite injuries, primarily to extremities, he reads. Hypothermia symptoms on multiple occasions. Some tissue damage consistent with prolonged cold exposure. He looks up from the file. The pattern was concerning, but your father's explanations were plausible. Rebecca leans forward. I tried to tell you the truth. Every single appointment, I tried to explain what was really happening. You also claim that Caroline was being systematically tortured, Dr. Thompson says, his tone carefully neutral. That seemed less plausible than a child with poor judgment about winter clothing. The clinical detachment in his voice makes my hands clench into fists. Did you ever examine the freezer in our basement? Did you ever ask how a child gets frostbite in July? Dr. Thompson's jaw tightens. Your father was a respected member of the community, a high school principal, for God's sake. The idea that he would deliberately harm his child? He trails off, but I can hear the rest of the sentence. It was easier to believe that a desperate mother was lying than that a pillar of the community was a monster. Show him the documentation, Rebecca says, pulling out her carefully preserved folder. Show him what you refuse to see then. Dr. Thompson examines Rebecca's records with the intensity of someone who knows his professional reputation is on the line. Photos of injuries he dismissed, diary entries he ignored, police reports he helped discredit. The evidence of a systematic campaign of abuse that he was positioned to stop but chose not to see. My God, he whispers, setting down a photograph of my hands after the freezer incident. The tissue damage is obvious, severe, nothing like the minor frostbite that might result from playing in snow. I should have known. I should have asked more questions. You should have believed my mother, I say. She was telling you the truth, and you chose to believe Dave's lies instead. Dr. Thompson removes his glasses and rubs his eyes. When he looks up, he seems to have aged another decade. I've been practicing medicine for 20 years. I've seen abuse cases, reported them, testified in court. But Dave Miller, he was so convincing, so concerned about his wife's mental state, so worried about your welfare. He made it seem like protecting you meant protecting you from her. The admission hangs in the air like smoke. Rebecca's vindication, finally, from someone who was there, someone who watched her fight for me and chose the wrong side. The medical records, I say. Do they support what really happened? Dr. Thompson nods slowly. The pattern of injuries is consistent with repeated exposure to extreme cold. The tissue damage, the nerve symptoms you mentioned, these aren't consistent with brief outdoor exposure. They're consistent with prolonged confinement in sub-freezing conditions. He's using clinical language to distance himself from the emotional weight of what he's admitting, that he documented evidence of torture and filed it under childhood accidents. Will you testify to that? Rebecca asks. Will you admit that the medical evidence support our version of events? Dr. Thompson is quiet for a long time, staring at the file that contains 4 years of missed opportunities. Yes, he finally says. I owe you both at least that much. Detective Jennifer Cole's office feels more like a therapist's space than a cop's. Warm lighting, comfortable chairs, boxes of tissue strategically placed. She's built a career on getting people to tell their worst stories, and the environment reflects that understanding. I specialize in historical abuse cases, she says, settling across from Rebecca and me with a notepad and careful attention. I have to tell you up front, these cases are difficult. Physical evidence degrades, witnesses forget or move away, and defendants often have years to build credible counter-narratives. I spread my evidence across her desk like I'm laying cards on a table. Medical records, photographs, Rebecca's documentation, Dr. Thompson's promised testimony, the accumulated weight of 16 years of buried truth. But sometimes, Detective Cole continues, examining my scarred hands, the evidence speaks for itself. She's methodical in her questions, building a timeline that stretches from my earliest memories to Dave's current position in the community. Each incident documented, cross-referenced, corroborated where possible. By the time we finish, she has 3 pages of notes and a grim expression. Your father has maintained his reputation remarkably well. Current high school principal, active in community organizations, no complaints or concerns in his professional file. He's exactly the kind of defendant that juries want to believe. But, Rebecca prompts,
But the medical evidence is compelling. Dr. Thompson's records, combined with his willingness to testify about the inconsistencies he ignored, create a strong foundation. And your documentation, Mrs. Miller, shows a pattern of attempted intervention that contradicts the unstable ex-wife narrative. Detective Cole leans back in her chair, studying us both. I have to ask, what's your goal here? Are you looking for criminal prosecution, civil action, or just acknowledgement of the truth? It's the question I've been avoiding because the answer feels too big, too demanding. What do I want from Dave Miller? What do I want from the community that failed me? What do I want from the system that silenced my mother? I want him to face consequences, I say, real ones, not just social embarrassment or professional inconvenience. I want him to be held accountable for what he did. Detective Cole nods. Criminal prosecution for historical child abuse. It's possible, given the evidence, but it won't be easy. We'll need more than medical records and your mother's documentation. We'll need witnesses, people who saw or heard something that contradicts the official story. Alex Rivera suggests Caroline's childhood friend. They've already admitted to seeing signs of abuse. That's a start. We'll also need to interview neighbors, teachers, anyone who had regular contact with your family during those years. Detective Cole makes more notes. And we'll need to examine your father's current situation for any patterns of controlling behavior or inappropriate conduct. The investigation feels both impossibly large and surprisingly concrete. After years of carrying this secret alone, the machinery of justice is finally engaging with my truth. There's something else, Detective Cole says, her tone shifting to something more personal. I grew up in a house where my stepfather's reputation protected him from consequences. I know what it's like to be the victim of someone everyone else sees as respectable. I want you to know that I believe you, and I'm going to work this case like it matters. For the first time in 16 years, I'm sitting across from an authority figure who sees Dave Miller as a suspect instead of a saint. It's a shift so profound that I can barely process it. What happens next? I ask. Next, we start talking to witnesses, and we see how many people are ready to stop protecting Dave Miller's reputation and start protecting the truth. Alex's police interview takes place in a sterile conference room that feels more like a business meeting than a criminal investigation. Detective Cole sits across from us with her recorder and patient expression, while Alex fidgets with a water bottle like it might provide answers. I need you to tell me what you observed during your friendship with Caroline, Detective Cole begins. Not what you were told to think about it, but what you actually saw and heard. Alex takes a shaky breath. The injuries were the most obvious thing. Caroline always had bandages or scabs or bruises that she couldn't quite explain. And the explanations never made sense. Falling through ice in summer, frostbite from building snowmen when there was no snow. Did you ever question these explanations? I was 12, 13, 14. When adults tell you something, you believe it, especially when it's a teacher, a principal, someone in authority. Detective Cole nods. What about Caroline's behavior? Did you notice changes? Alex is quiet for a long moment, and I can see them wrestling with memories they've spent years trying to forget. She became afraid of basements, wouldn't go downstairs at anyone's house, not even mine. And she was obsessed with temperature, always asking if places were too cold, if we could turn up the heat. I thought it was weird, but not significant. Did you ever see Dave Miller discipline Caroline? Once. The word comes out like a confession. I was sleeping over, and Caroline spilled juice at dinner. Dave didn't yell or anything, but his voice got very quiet, very controlled.
He made her clean it up and then sent her to her room. But the way she reacted, she was terrified. Not embarrassed or annoyed like a normal kid would be, terrified. Detective Cole makes notes. Did you tell anyone about these observations? I mentioned some of it to my parents, but they said Dave was doing his best as a single father, that Caroline was acting out because of her mother's abandonment. They made it sound like being concerned about Caroline meant criticizing Dave, and nobody wanted to do that. The interview continues for another hour, with Alex providing details that individually seemed minor, but collectively painted a picture of a child living in fear. By the time we're finished, Detective Cole has filled 6 pages with observations that were dismissed or ignored for 16 years. There's one more thing, Alex says as we're packing up. Mrs. Walsh, the neighbor next door to your old house, she mentioned once that she heard strange sounds from your basement at night, crying, sometimes screaming, but Dave told everyone on the block that you had night terrors, that the sounds were part of your psychological problems. Detective Cole's pen stops moving. Mrs. Walsh still lives next door? Dorothy Walsh, yes. She's in her 70s now, but she's sharp, and she's always felt guilty about not doing more to help.
Within 2 hours, we're sitting in Mrs. Walsh's living room, surrounded by the accumulated clutter of a long life. She serves tea with shaking hands and keeps apologizing for the mess, but her eyes are clear and focused when Detective Cole explains why we're here. I heard that child crying so many nights, she says, looking directly at me. Not normal crying, not the kind of fuss children make when they're upset. This was different, desperate, like someone was hurt and scared and couldn't get help. Did you ever call the police? Detective Cole asks. Mrs. Walsh's face crumples with guilt. Dave explained that Caroline had severe night terrors, that calling attention to them would make them worse. He said the best thing neighbors could do was ignore the episodes and let him handle them professionally. He was so knowledgeable about child psychology, so concerned about getting Caroline the right help. Another manipulation, another layer of Dave's systematic control over the narrative. He didn't just abuse me, he inoculated the entire neighborhood against helping me. But I did do one thing, Mrs. Walsh continues, getting up and moving toward an old desk in the corner. My late husband, Harold, was worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. He installed a security system in 1998, just after Caroline's family moved in. It recorded audio from our backyard, but it also picked up sounds from next door. Detective Cole sits up straighter. Are you saying you have recordings? Harold never threw anything away. When he died last year, I found boxes of old cassette tapes in the basement. I haven't listened to them, couldn't bear to, but they're labeled by date. Some of them might have captured what was really happening in that house. The possibility of audio evidence hangs in the air like a prayer answered. Not just witness testimony or medical records, but Dave's own voice, caught in the act of abuse he spent years explaining away. Mrs. Walsh retrieves a box full of cassette tapes, each one meticulously labeled with dates from 1998 to 2005. 7 years of potential evidence, including the entire period of my systematic abuse. I kept hoping someone would ask the right questions, Mrs. Walsh says, handing the box to Detective Cole. I kept thinking that eventually someone would realize that little girl needed help. But nobody ever asked, and by the time she grew up and moved away, it seemed too late to matter. Detective Cole cradles the box like it contains treasure. Mrs. Walsh, this could be the evidence we need to prove what really happened in that house. Are you willing to let us examine these tapes and potentially use them as evidence? That's why I kept them, Mrs. Walsh says firmly. Harold always said the truth has a way of surfacing, even when people try to bury it. If these tapes can help Caroline get justice, then that's what they're for. As we leave Mrs. Walsh's house with 16 years of potential evidence, I feel something shifting in the community that failed me. The conspiracy of silence that protected Dave is developing cracks, and through those cracks, the truth is finally beginning to emerge. Nathan Miller's office reeks of expensive cologne and fear. His hands shake as Detective Cole sets up the recording equipment, knowing his world is about to crumble.
I sit across from his mahogany desk, watching the man who built his success on Dave's reputation, prepared to confront the truth. "This is insane," Nathan whispers. "Uncle Dave raised you. He's a pillar of this community." Detective Cole plays the first tape. My 12-year-old voice screams through the speakers, raw with terror. Dave's calm response follows. "You'll stay in there until you learn gratitude. This is what happens when you disrespect your father." Nathan's face drains of color. "That's not possible. He wouldn't." "We have 17 hours of recordings," Detective Cole says. "Your uncle documented his own crimes." The confrontation happens 3 hours later. Nathan wears a wire as he faces Dave in the house where I was tortured. Through our earpieces, we hear Dave's mask slip completely when pressed about the evidence. "I did what was necessary," Dave snarls when Nathan mentions the recordings. "Caroline needed discipline, structure, consequences. Everything I did was for her own good." "Locking a child in a freezer is not discipline." "Don't lecture me about parenting," Dave's voice explodes with rage. "I turned Caroline from a spoiled, defiant brat into a functional adult. If she's too weak to appreciate that sacrifice now, that's her failure." The confession pours out like poison, years of justified abuse finally spoken aloud. Dave threatens Nathan, promises to destroy everything he's built if he betrays the family. But Nathan's response is quiet and final. "I believe Caroline. And you just confessed to child abuse on a recording that's going straight to the police." The search warrant arrives at dawn. Detective Cole's team tears through Dave's house while I wait across the street, watching my childhood home give up its secrets. They find the surveillance system hidden behind a false wall in the basement. 7 years of recordings that Dave kept like trophies. "He documented everything," Detective Cole tells me, emerging with boxes of equipment. "Not just the abuse, phone calls with doctors, conversations with neighbors, meetings with school officials. He recorded himself building the narrative that protected him."
Back at the station, we listened to Dave's voice orchestrating my destruction with clinical precision. Phone calls where he describes my self-harm episodes to Dr. Thompson. Conversations where he explains my night terrors to concerned neighbors. Meeting recordings where he discusses my abandonment issues with school counselors. Each clip reveals the systematic nature of his manipulation. Dave didn't just abuse me, he inoculated an entire community against believing me, using his professional authority to preemptively discredit any accusations I might make. The most damning evidence comes from the basement itself. Hours of audio documenting torture, with Dave providing commentary on his methods like a professor lecturing students. "Consistency is key," he says on one 2002 recording. "Caroline needs to understand that defiance has consequences. The cold helps her focus on the lesson." The prosecutor calls it the strongest historical abuse case she's ever seen. The defendant literally created his own evidence, Alana Rodriguez tells us. Any defense attorney would normally argue that memories are unreliable, but we have the perpetrator's own voice describing systematic torture. Dave's arrest at the high school makes the evening news. Students and faculty watch in shock as the principal who preached character gets led away in handcuffs. The local newspaper splits the community with its headline, "Respected Principal Charged with Decades-Old Child Abuse." The courthouse steps buzz with reporters and divided loyalties. Half the town still can't believe Dave Miller could be a monster. The other half is re-examining memories they've buried for years. I walk through the chaos with Rebecca and Detective Cole, my scarred hands visible for everyone to see. Inside, Dave sits at the defendant's table, projecting authority he no longer possesses. The prosecutor's opening statement is surgical. You're going to hear David Miller's voice describing the torture of his daughter as if it were a teaching method. 7 years of recorded evidence that the defendant created himself. The defense tries expected strategies, troubled child, ambiguous evidence, revenge fantasy, but testimony destroys their narrative. Dr. Thompson admits to missing obvious signs. Mrs. Walsh describes sounds she ignored. Alex Rivera confesses to witnessing abuse and staying silent.
Rebecca takes the stand with 16 years of documentation. I was labeled mentally unstable for trying to protect my daughter. David Miller used his reputation to silence me, to turn my attempts to save Caroline into evidence of my unfitness. When I testify, the courtroom falls silent. I tell my story simply, without dramatics. The facts speak for themselves. Dave stares at me with the same calculating expression he wore when locking me in that freezer, still trying to control the narrative. The prosecutor plays Dave's recordings chronologically, 7 years of escalating abuse described in clinical detail. Jurors listen with growing horror as Dave's voice explains torture techniques like teaching methods. Dave's testimony portrays him as an overwhelmed single father, making difficult choices with a troubled child. It's masterful manipulation, hitting every sympathy note. But the prosecutor's rebuttal is devastating. She plays recording after recording of Dave's calm voice describing systematic cruelty. This is not a desperate father, she tells the jury. This is a man who enjoyed absolute power over a helpless child. The jury deliberates 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentences Dave to 12 years, calling it one of the most systematic examples of child abuse she's seen in 20 years. As they lead Dave away, he looks at me with impotent rage. For 16 years, he controlled the narrative. Today, truth won. Outside, Rebecca and I stand in Minnesota sunshine, surrounded by supporters. The scared 12-year-old who counted minutes in a freezer has finally been heard. Justice doesn't erase trauma, but it transforms survival into proof that truth always surfaces. 6 months after the trial, I stand in the basement of my childhood home one last time. The new owners, the Walsh family, offered to let me say goodbye before they renovate. The freezer is gone, hauled away as evidence that will never be returned. In its place sits a children's play area, bright and warm and full of the kind of laughter that never existed in this space when it was mine. It feels different, Rebecca says, standing beside me on the concrete floor where I once counted minutes in frozen terror. Lighter, somehow. She's right. Without Dave's presence poisoning every corner, the house has become just a house. The ghosts are gone, replaced by the ordinary chaos of a family that actually lives here instead of just surviving. Rebecca and I started family therapy 3 weeks after the verdict. Dr. Martinez specializes in reunification cases, helping families rebuild after trauma and separation. The first session was awkward, stilted, full of careful apologies and tentative hope. But slowly, we're learning how to be mother and daughter again. I missed your first steps, your first day of school, your graduation, Rebecca told me during one session. I can't get those moments back, but I can be here for everything that comes next. And she has been. When my software consulting firm landed a major contract last month, she was the first person I called. When I had nightmares after testifying, she sat with me until dawn, the way she used to when I was small. We're building new memories to overlay the painful ones, creating a relationship based on who we are now instead of who we were forced to be then.
The ripple effects of Dave's conviction spread through the community like stones thrown in still water. 3 former students came forward with their own stories of inappropriate discipline and psychological manipulation. The school board launched an investigation into his entire tenure as principal, reviewing policies and examining complaints that were previously dismissed. Alex Rivera and I started a support group for survivors of family abuse, meeting monthly at the community center. What began as 5 people sitting in a circle has grown to nearly 30. We share stories, resources, and the kind of validation that comes from being truly heard by people who understand. The hardest part, says Maria, a woman whose father's emotional abuse lasted into her 20s, is learning to trust your own memories. When someone spends years telling you that your reality is wrong, it takes time to believe in truth again. I nod, understanding completely. Recovery isn't just about processing trauma, it's about rebuilding your relationship with reality itself, learning that your perceptions matter, that your experiences are valid, that you deserve to take up space in the world without apologizing for existing. Dr. Thompson joined our advisory board, using his medical expertise to help other survivors navigate the healthcare system. His guilt over failing me has transformed into action, And he's training other doctors to recognize signs of systematic abuse that might be disguised as accidents or behavioral problems. We see what we expect to see, he told our group during his first visit. My job is to train medical professionals to expect the unexpected, to question explanations that seem too convenient, to remember that sometimes parents lie. Detective Cole has become something like a friend, checking in regularly and consulting on cases that remind her of mine. The recordings from Dave's surveillance system are now used in law enforcement training seminars, teaching officers how systematic abusers document and justify their crimes. Your case changed how I approach historical abuse investigations, she told me recently. It proved that evidence exists even when victims think it's gone forever. Sometimes perpetrators create their own downfall through their need to control the narrative. Nathan Miller sold his insurance agency and now works for a nonprofit that provides legal services to abuse survivors. His transition from enabler to advocate wasn't easy. He spent months in therapy processing his own complicity and the ways Dave manipulated his loyalty. I benefited from a system that silenced you, he told me during a difficult conversation last month. The least I can do is spend the rest of my career trying to dismantle similar systems. Mrs. Walsh, now 74, has become an unexpected ally. She speaks at community events about the importance of intervention, about how bystander silence becomes complicity. Her late husband's recordings didn't just convict Dave. They sparked a neighborhood initiative to create better systems for protecting vulnerable children. I can't undo 16 years of choosing comfort over courage, but I can spend whatever time I have left making sure other children don't suffer in silence. The most surprising healing has come through my work. I've specialized in developing software systems for child protection agencies, creating tools that help social workers identify patterns of abuse and track cases more effectively. Technology can't replace human judgment, but it can support workers who are trying to see through the fog of manipulation that surrounds systematic abuse. Today, as Rebecca and I leave the house for the last time, I feel something I never expected to feel about this place. Peace. The basement that once held my worst nightmares now echoes with children's laughter. The neighborhood that once chose silence is learning to speak up. The community that once protected Dave Miller is slowly learning to protect its most vulnerable members instead. Do you regret it? Asks Rebecca as we drive away. Going through everything it took to get justice? I consider the question seriously. The investigation was exhausting. The trial was traumatic. The public scrutiny was overwhelming. But sitting beside my mother, free to build a relationship based on truth instead of lies, I know my answer. No, I say, watching the house disappear in the rearview mirror. I regret the 16 years I spent believing I was crazy. I regret the time we lost to Dave's manipulation. But I don't regret fighting for the truth. My name is Caroline Evans. I'm 29 now, but the night that shaped me happened when I was 12. My father, Dave, locked me in the basement freezer during a Minnesota blizzard. And for 16 years, the world told me it never happened. Today, the world knows better. Truth has a way of surfacing, even when people try to bury it. Sometimes it takes decades. Sometimes it takes scars that won't fade and recordings that can't be explained away. Sometimes it takes a community learning that protecting reputation isn't the same as protecting children. But it always surfaces. And when it does, survivors stop being victims and start being witnesses, not just to what happened to them, but to what's possible when silence finally breaks.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.